Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hethel Chawla. I am the chair of the Lawyer Wellness Committee of the Virginia Bar Association's Young Lawyers Division. This webinar today, A Busy Lawyer's Lunchbox, Sustainable Tips for Meal Planning, comes to you today as part of our Lawyer Wellness Challenge webinar series. It is my pleasure to introduce Nikky Hindle. Nikky is the owner of Nova Sports Nutrition. She is a registered dietitian. She's a certified personal trainer. She's got quite a diverse background. I would encourage all of you to check out her website in the chat feature. Nikky is an athlete. She's a nutrition counselor. As I said, she was a personal trainer. Her background is interesting because of the way that her focus on lawyer wellness kind of naturally evolved. As part of her practice, she frequently does nutrition counseling for lots of professionals. And she found around 2019 that she was working with a lot of attorneys. And no surprise to any of us, they were struggling a lot with a busy schedule, how to plan healthy meals on the go. So she found herself doing a lot of research in this area, working with employers and firms and attorneys, trying to find out what is it about, lawyers specifically that makes it so difficult for them to kind of prioritize their, physical wellness in this area. Nikky also has participated in a lot of webinars related to lawyer wellness. She recently was a panelist for the VBA when we did our workplace wellness series. She also has a webinar on the Virginia CLE website, which I encourage all of you to check out. It's free and it's still there, and it focuses a lot on lawyers and law firms and how firms can really support their attorneys in the areas of lawyer wellness. So it is my pleasure, Nikky, again, and I'm going to pass the mic over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Hethel. I really appreciate it. And welcome, everybody. I really appreciate you being here today. And I really hope that today you can walk away with some helpful tips to make meal planning and healthy snacking really sustainable for you. I work with a lot of clients, and I know that it's very different to integrate meal planning and meal prepping into your life if you're working 60 or 80 or 100 hours a week versus 40. So the talk today is really geared towards those individuals that don't have that typical 9-to-5 job necessarily and need to get a little bit more creative with how they can eat healthfully, knowing that they don't have as much time and resources to always devote to healthy eating. So Hethel did a great job introducing me. As she mentioned, I am the owner of Nova Sports Nutrition, which was founded in Fairfax, Virginia in 2017. I currently see all my clients virtually, and I do a lot of webinars virtually as well. And I use a HIPAA compliant platform for my individual sessions that's called Healthy. And I'm happy to talk a little bit more about what I do to work with individuals on a one-on-one basis at the end, but just wanted to give that little brief introduction on how I work my business right now. So just for a quick outline of what we're going to talk about today, we're going to go through the basic steps of meal planning. It might sound kind of basic, some of it, but I know for a lot of people, even if they feel like they know what they should be doing with nutrition, they still find that they're not actually following through and planning their meals and prepping things in advance. So we're going to try to talk about strategies that can make that more realistic. And then also talk about options for when you don't have time to cook, what you could do with meal delivery or pre-made options, as well as what you need to do or what you need to think about when you're going out to eat for meals. We will take a break midway through to see if there's any questions at that point, just to give us a little break and review what we talked about. And then we'll be ending with healthy snack options, 10 dietitian approved snacks that are easy to keep at your desk, really easy to prep at home, take 5 minutes or less, in some cases 10 seconds or less to prepare. And then we'll have some more time for questions at the end. If you do have a question you don't want to forget as we go along, feel free to put it in the chat, but otherwise we'll open up the floor for questions at those times that I mentioned. So first, we're going to talk about steps for meal planning. And these are things that ideally I want my clients to do every single week. So first, we're going to talk about some of the key tips for meal planning. And I have this little acronym here. It says be brave, which really stands for balance, regularity, adequacy, variety, and engage. So I'll talk about what each of those means. So first, what I want my clients to think about when they are planning their meals for the week is having balance at every meal. So what that usually means is making sure there's a good mix of macronutrients and micronutrients. Many of you have probably heard of macronutrients. That includes carbohydrates, proteins, and fat. And these are called macronutrients because we need them in large quantities, and they are also our energy containing nutrients, or the nutrients that give us calories. So we need each of those three at every meal ideally, because they all serve a different purpose and all of them give us energy to do mental work and physical work throughout the day. Now, the micronutrients aren't talked about quite as often, but the micronutrients really just refer to vitamins and minerals. So they are nutrients we need in much smaller quantities, and they also don't give us energy. They aren't going to contain calories, but we do still need them to use energy during the day and to help us stay well and prevent us from getting sick. So we need those vitamins and minerals just as much as we need the macronutrients. And then once we're done thinking about balance, we also have to think about regularity of eating. And this I know is very hard for a lot of people. I think we've probably all been there where, we've had a very busy day, we've had back-to-back meetings, maybe you've had to travel outside the office for meetings, and all of a sudden you realize that you're starving and you haven't eaten something in 6 or 7 or 8 hours. Usually at that point, we are so hungry that we just want to eat whatever is fastest, and usually foods that are very palatable. So high carbohydrate, high fat, high sodium foods. And a lot of times when we're that hungry, it's really difficult to moderate portions. Our body's kind of in overdrive, really looking for fast food. And usually we'll eat so quickly that by the time we realize we ate too much, it's too late, right? We've already done, a lot more damage than what we would have done if we had actually eaten a little bit sooner. So one of the things I really want a lot of my clients to do is try to eat every 3 to 4 hours. And we use that as a mark too to help us with planning when meals and snacks should be throughout the day. So I'll talk a little bit more about that throughout the planning process, but regularity is a really key point to remember. Now, the third one is adequacy, which kind of goes back to balance a little bit, but this is just making sure you're consuming enough of all the nutrients. So sometimes people will say like, oh yeah, I'm good. Like I got, my protein at my meal, but they really only had like 2 slices of very thin turkey. And that's probably not enough for most people. Or they'll say like, oh yeah, I got like, some healthy fat at this meal, but it's only, like 3 almonds. Like that's not going to be enough. That's not going to give you everything you need. So it's not just about the balance of having, representation of the different food groups, but also having enough from each. And the actual portion size varies a little bit person to person. So I'll mostly talk today in kind of general terms, but I'll try to give you some pointers that could be helpful when deciding what amount to have. And then variety is really important. It's helpful to get variety in to prevent getting bored with the food that you're eating, which can also then lead to more cravings. But also we do just get different vitamins and minerals from different types of foods within the same food group. So one thing I usually tell people is to try to eat the rainbow with fruits and vegetables, because different fruits and vegetables actually have different vitamins and minerals. So for example, vitamin A is typically found in orange vegetables or leafy greens. But if you're eating a lot of like, let's say onions or peppers or mushrooms, those are really good vegetable sources, not going to be good sources of vitamin A. So it is easy to actually develop nutrient deficiencies if you're only eating the same few foods within each food group. So variety is really key for that reason too. And our last point here, engage, really just speaks to being mindful when you're eating, which I do know is a lot easier said than done. But ideally, when we're eating, we want to try to not be doing other things that really demand our attention, like checking email or driving a car or watching TV, because then it's really easy to lose track of how much you've eaten. And it actually interferes with your body's signals telling you that you're full. You haven't really connected with how much you've had. and it's easy to still feel hungry even after eating a normal amount of food. So trying to put down like the phone and just sit down at the kitchen table and eat without any distractions is something I really encourage, even if it's something you can only do once or twice a day. So remember, be brave with your meal prep. All right. So once we have gotten through that, the first step really that we want to do with meal planning is mapping out what your week is going to look like. So if we're planning for the week, every person at a bare minimum should have 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then we add snacks in as needed, as I mentioned, to fill in those gaps where we're going to have more than 4 hours between a meal. So let's just say if I'm working with a client to build their meal plan schedule, if they have breakfast normally at 8 and lunch at noon, that's 4 hours. We probably don't need a mid-morning snack. So we probably just go from breakfast straight to lunch. But then if lunch is at noon and dinner's at 7, that's a pretty big gap in between. So we're going to want to include a snack intentionally in between there. So that snack is part of that planning process. Now, other things just to consider when you're creating your meal plan each week is how many people are you cooking for? Or if someone else is doing the cooking, how many people do they have to account for in putting together this meal plan? So if we originally said we're thinking about, 7 dinners for the week, if you have a second person there, now we're looking at 14, or if we have kids, we have to include their food needs as well. So that's a really important part of that planning process. And then we want to get specific about the amount of time that is available to cook each week and when you're going to be able to do it. It's not enough just to say like, oh, I'm going to try to cook more. A lot of times if people make a vague goal like that, it's really hard to follow through. So I always encourage my clients to tell me, when are you going to cook and how much time do you have to cook? So we might decide, all right, we can put aside an hour Sunday and Wednesday, and that's it. That's all the time there is. That honestly is plenty of time to cook enough for the week and fill in gaps as needed with, ready to go meals or meal delivery services. So we'll talk more about that coming up, right? But we really just want to make sure we are thinking about what we have available in terms of our time realistically, and make sure we make a plan and make it, something we schedule honestly into our lives, just like we would anything else. And then lastly, do you have any special events or meals out this week? That's important because if you have meals out, you obviously don't have to cook for those meals, and you want to take that into account as part of your planning process and still think about those brave principles going into those events. So just to show you as a visual, this is an actual worksheet that I have some of my clients fill out. I'll give it to them as either like a Word document or a PDF. And it's really helpful, especially in the beginning, just to literally write out what you're going to have. So like I said, everyone should have at least 3 meals, and then we might have, 1 to 2, maybe 3 snacks, depending on the person. And some people might have like the same breakfast every day for the whole week. That's totally fine. We can get our variety in other places, but just mapping it out visually like this can be really helpful for a lot of people. And I have some clients that don't necessarily use this template. They kind of make their own thing, or they, just create a list in their notes app on their phone. That's totally fine. Whatever works for you, whatever's going to be sustainable is how you want to do it. And you might not have to literally write it out like this every week forever, but especially in the beginning, like I said, this is helpful. And some people really do enjoy doing this every week, especially if they have a family and they're trying to get everyone on the same page about what the food options are going to be. This can end up being a really helpful tool. And I'm happy to send out this template later if that's something that people are interested in and they want to have access to. But once we've made that plan for the week, we know what we're going to have for our breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks. Then we want to make the grocery list or make the food order if you're ordering groceries. So if you're making a grocery list, you can keep this really simple. You can use just a regular pen and paper, or I use the notes app on my phone. So I can just bring my phone with me and make sure I'm checking things off as I go. There's also grocery apps that, you could utilize as well. There's an app for everything nowadays. So I encourage people to, make their grocery list based on the recipes and the meals and snacks that you said you wanted to have that week. And make sure, of course, when you're making your list that you are checking your pantry, your fridge, and your freezer to make sure anything you put on that list isn't something you already have at home, or to make sure that you don't actually need to add additional things like staples to your grocery list. Like maybe you're out of olive oil or soy sauce or minced garlic, things like that. So that way, ideally, we're avoiding food waste and we're avoiding extra trips to the grocery store, neither of which are good, right? So we make that grocery list and we either go out to the store and get the groceries, or we put that food order in. If we're going to have the groceries delivered, we can have groceries delivered, or at least, all picked out and ready to go for pickup from a lot of stores nowadays. So I think you can do it at Giant, Aldi, Wegmans, Harris Teeter, pretty much anywhere you can think of. So that can be a good cost, not cost saving, but time saving option if that's helpful for you. So once we have the groceries at home, the next thing that we really want to do is prep the meals and snacks for the week if we have the time. Now, sometimes people do this a little bit every day. They just kind of put aside like what food they're going to have for the next day, the night before, or the morning before they go to work. Other people really like to prep kind of everything as much as possible for the week, the day before work starts, which is usually on Sunday. We can do, whatever works best for the individual. Again, I'm all about customization and doing whatever's going to be sustainable. And sometimes part of meal prep does include making like 1 or 2 recipes for the week, or even batch cooking, like making, a huge crock pot of shredded chicken, for example, or a lot of like roasted vegetables in the oven, and just being able to reheat leftovers for a few days during the week. But most importantly, be realistic and start small. It can be really tempting, I think, for a lot of people to change everything at once. And you don't necessarily have to do a huge overhaul to see success over time. So even if we start with, incorporating healthy snacks, or we start with the principle of like regularity of eating, and we come back later to, making sure the meals are balanced and have variety, that's okay, right? So even if you don't feel like you can do all of this at once, we want to at least pick a few things to start with wherever you see areas for improvement. And of course, it's important to remember that we're not just trying to do this for 1 week. We ideally want to do these steps every single week long term in order to really be healthy and get in all the nutrients that your body needs. So, just to give you another idea of like what this looks like in practice, for some people, it might be that, on Saturday, that's where you're taking the time to write out your meal plan for the next week, make your grocery list, and go to the grocery store. And then Sunday, we're doing some meal prep. We're maybe making some recipes, or at least putting aside our snacks for the week. And then we're, already deciding like where are we going to cook again, like during the week if we have the time. Are we going to do that Tuesday, Thursday, or Wednesday? Are we going to have, that opportunity to get food out? Where's that going to fit in, right? And then we do the same thing again the next weekend. So we just want to make it sustainable. It sounds like a lot at first, but honestly, every week, this maybe takes me like an hour or so to do. It takes like 15 minutes to do the meal planning, 15 minutes to make the grocery list, and then maybe half an hour in the grocery store. And then the time to actually prep the food is variable, but just the planning part really and getting the groceries is about an hour. So it's not a ton of time. You usually can fit this in, and you can use those options like the grocery delivery if needed to help make it a little easier. And I did just want to share some recipe resources. I would encourage you to take a screenshot of this if you want. But these are some of the recipe resources I use online very regularly. Budget Bites is really nice because it does take into account like cost. So if you really want to focus on cost savings with groceries, that's a great option. They have a lot of options that are very healthy and easy to get at any grocery store. And they don't include nutrition facts. So for some people, I know that's something they like. If that's something that you prefer to have information on, the other 4 options are better to look at. So Cooking Light, Well Plated, Minimalist Baker, and Skinny Taste. I recommend recipes from here all the time for my clients. They have a lot of really good options, and good options that taste good. I never like to recommend things that don't taste good, because even if something is healthy for you but you don't like how it tastes, you're probably not going to stick with it, right? So again, sustainability is the key. You want to always find things that are going to meet your nutrition goals, but also be things that you enjoy, because we want eating to be enjoyable. So check these resources out when you have the chance, when you're doing your meal planning. Now, again, I do know that there are weeks where there literally is just no time to cook. It's just not possible. It's just work and sleep pretty much. So if that's the case, I want to talk about what I would recommend in those cases. So some of you might have seen these pre-made meal options. A lot of grocery stores like Wegmans, Harris Teeter, or like ShopRite are really good places to look at for this, depending on where you're located. So these options are typically going to be things like salmon with green beans or like chicken marsala with roasted potatoes. But what you'll notice in a lot of these meals is that we're looking for options that combine the mix of macronutrients. So we're looking for a protein source, usually like a lean protein source like chicken breast or lean ground turkey or white fish like cod. Salmon is a really good option, even though it's not a lean protein per se. It is a higher fat content, but it is a healthy fat. So salmon is another great protein source. And then we also want to get some kind of vegetable in. So again, ideally, we like to have variety with vegetables, different colors for different nutrients. But for individual meals, it's fine if there's just like one vegetable per meal. We can just get variety day to day or week to week. And then the carbohydrate is optional, I would say, just depending on the individual goals. Like if I do have a client that is focused on lowering their blood sugar and they have prediabetes or diabetes, we may not always include a carbohydrate with their meal. But for a lot of other people, we do want to include that because it's a good energy source, good source of fiber. So carbohydrates I would recommend looking for would be like rice or quinoa. I usually prefer brown rice or wild rice if we can do that. We could also look at lentils or beans, whole wheat pasta, and then starchy vegetables like potatoes can also be a really good healthy source too. White potatoes or sweet potatoes both have a lot of good nutritional content. So look for these things if you're busy. This can help to supplement a very busy week. And if you don't have time to cook, a lot of these options are still made pretty fresh and don't have like a lot of artificial ingredients or preservatives in them. And then meal delivery options can be another really good resource as well. For anyone that's in the like DC area, I have a lot of my clients use Mighty Meals. What I like about Mighty Meals is they deliver the food to you and it's completely ready to go. You just have to heat it up and it's done, which is different than some of these other options like HelloFresh or Green Chef, where they ship you the ingredients, but you still have to cook the meal. So you still need to build that time in for cooking. So different options will work well for different people. If part of what is challenging about cooking is just picking out the recipes and having the food actually in your home ready to go, HelloFresh or Green Chef can be great. They have good fresh ingredients and a lot of healthy options. But if not having the time to cook is really the problem, I would recommend something like Mighty Meals. And even if you're not in the DC area, there are a lot of these options similar to Mighty Meals popping up in different places. I even know of a place that's available out in Front Royal, Virginia that does the same kind of thing where they're giving you the food ready to go. You just have to heat it up. So they're popping up even in more rural towns, which is really awesome. So keep an eye out for these things. Do some research on what's in your area if you think something like this would help you out. And then I also did put on here Daily Harvest as another option. I just put the asterisk there just because Daily Harvest is all vegetarian or vegan. I can't remember which. I think it's vegan. And that is a good option in terms of being like a highly nutritious, food delivery service. But because it's vegan, some of their stuff is lower protein. And that can be okay for some people, but for others, if you, really enjoy like working out a lot, or depending on like what medical conditions you have, you might need extra protein. So in that case, we might have to add still additional protein sources for that option to work for some people. So I just wanted to make a note there. All of the other ones are good for a variety of different diets for, gluten-free or low carb or vegetarian or vegan. So Daily Harvest is just a little bit unique in that way. And then of course, there's going to be opportunities to eat meals out, times where you might go out with like coworkers or family. And it's important to keep in mind tips there as well for how you can make good choices and stick with nutritious options that are going to help you reach whatever goals you're working towards right now. So my biggest tips here is, if possible, do try to review the menu or the nutrition facts online ahead of time. I find that makes it a lot easier to make a healthy choice and just have a better sense of what's really going to be a balanced option versus what is going to be more of like a potentially like sneaky, less healthy option. I think a big offender in that category is salads. I think a lot of times we think salads are going to be healthy, and then sometimes they're really loaded with like extra fat and calories. So checking things out ahead of time is a really great strategy if that's an option. Obviously, you won't always be able to do that. So if you're going to a restaurant where the menu or the nutrition facts is not online in advance, then you want to just take a look when you get there and try to look for something that is balanced. So when we talk about balanced, remember we're talking about a good amount of macronutrients and micronutrients. So things I typically recommend that people look for, again, is that lean protein, or we could do like a fish like salmon, or a vegetarian option like tofu or beans, but some kind of protein source. And then we want to include vegetables. And then we want to include usually a carb source. Again, we're looking mainly for whole grains or potatoes or something like that. And usually I'm recommending that we try to limit like very high fat meals for a lot of people. So if something seems like it's going to come with like a cream sauce or a lot of cheese, or if it's something that is fried, of course, like those are things I typically recommend that we steer away from and try to limit, especially depending on someone's medical history. And then, as we all know, portions at meals out can be kind of ridiculous sometimes. So, if you're getting used to meal planning at home, you should gradually start to get a sense of like, what does like a normal portion of protein or carbohydrates or vegetables look like for me. And obviously, I'm not really worried about people going over on vegetables, but the carbohydrates and protein can definitely be a thing. So when you're going out to a restaurant, try to assess like what is on your plate in front of you and how that compares to what you have at home, to see if maybe you need to just cut that meal in half and take some home, or if you need to, be a little bit more mindful about when you need to stop eating based on your hunger and fullness cues. And last but not least, don't go to the meal starving. This goes back around to what I talked about earlier with regularity. I know a lot of times people might think like, oh, if I'm going to go out to eat, I just don't want to eat anything during the day, so that way I can eat more later. But again, the thing that you're putting at risk there is that you're going to be so hungry that it's going to be hard to make a healthy choice. And even beyond that, some of the concerns I have about people skipping meals is that they could just end up with really low blood sugar, which can make it difficult to concentrate and also can lead to symptoms like dizziness and fainting. So it's really good not to skip meals. Make sure you're not starving going to the restaurant. Just try to eat regularly throughout the day if you can. If anything, I might tell people you could have a smaller portion of meals or snacks if you just know that there's going to be a lot of food you want to eat at that restaurant that you don't normally get to have, but you don't want to go starving. You'll feel a lot better eating pretty normally throughout the day, and you won't feel as stuffed after that meal. So keep all of these tips in mind when you're going out to eat. So we're going to take a few minutes right now just to see if anyone has questions. I think we have some questions in the chat, so I'll let Hindle share some of those with us.
Thanks so much, Nikki. I don't see any questions right now at the moment. However, I did have a question. When you were referring to macronutrients per meal, do you have a recommendation as far as, how many grams of protein, carbs, and fat to sort of aim for per meal?
Yeah, I mean, it's very different person to person. So when I work with someone individually, I definitely can give more specific recommendations. What I might try to recommend is just kind of thinking about like what the portion should look like on your plate for the average person. So like for protein, the cue I give is that like a 3-ounce portion of chicken or fish or turkey is about the size of a deck of cards. So if you can visualize that, that is a good serving for some people. It might be up to 6 ounces for others. So usually like 1 to 2 decks of cards of protein is a good visual. And then with the carbohydrates, we normally are aiming for about half a cup. So half a cup, if you think of like an ice cream scoop, it would be like that amount. So if you had like, rice that was packed together like that, that would be like one serving for a lot of people, but some people might need two. So again, it's kind of a range. It depends on the individual. The other cue I like to give people, if anyone's heard of like the My Plate model, that's a nutrition model that replaced the food guide pyramid, and it's more visual, and it kind of just tells you to try to make half your plate fruit or vegetables and a quarter protein and a quarter carbohydrates. So that can be a good cue too when you're out to eat and you can kind of see, or even at home, and just to see like, does this match with that, or is the portions, a little bit out of balance for this meal?
Okay, great. Thanks, Nikki. I do
Mhm.
have a comment in the chat. For people that, go out to eat, and then of course there's a bread basket that is at the table. Do you
Mhm.
have any kind of tricks or suggestions as far as how people can kind of, limit the amount of bread they're eating before the meal? Or how would you address that?
Yeah, good question. So that does come back around to trying to not go to the meal hungry, because obviously if you are feeling starving by the time you sit down, it's going to be really hard to not have a piece of bread from the bread basket. So if you're not starving when you go, that'll help. Other things I might tell people, like if they're going to go out and they're kind of concerned about like there's going to be bread and people are going to be drinking, and like what if people get dessert? So I usually try to tell people, see if you can just pick one of those to have when you're out, dessert, alcohol, or bread, and stick with that. So that way it sometimes helps people a little bit to think like, okay, I'm not like completely depriving myself, but I'm needing to be mindful about what I really want in the moment. So it helps to kind of reinforce that mindfulness principle and not just kind of like eating whatever's in front of you or doing whatever other people are doing without, necessarily having to say no to everything. So that can work well for some people. Again, it depends on your goals. Like if someone's trying to lower their blood sugar, we do have to pay a lot more attention to the carbohydrates at the meal. But if someone's just trying to eat healthier in general, that can be like a good little strategy.
Great. Thanks so much, Nikki.
Mhm. All right. So we'll move on for now, and we'll have some time at the end for additional questions if there are any. All right. So the second part of the presentation is going to focus on healthy snacks, and there will be a little bit of a visual demo component to this. So I know that for a lot of people, there are needs to have healthy snacks because there might be days where, again, there's a lot of distance in between meals, there's a lot of back-to-back meetings. Maybe sometimes people really don't even have time for lunch and they only have like 10 minutes to eat, and we actually need to kind of have healthy snacks scattered throughout the day just to get enough in. So I have a few healthy snacks that I'm going to go over today. My 10 dietitian approved snacks that are going to be balanced and have a good amount of nutrients. And again, they take very little time to prepare. Most of them are literally just grab and go. And the ones that do require a little bit of prep are 5 minutes or less. So should be really realistic and doable regardless of the situation. So before I get into the specific examples, just a few quick tips to keep in mind. Again, even with snacks, we still want to look for balanced macronutrients most of the time. If we can get in carbohydrates, proteins, and fat, that's great. If we can at least get two of them, I would say that's pretty good. So we want to think about that. Of course, we still want to get micronutrients in if we can with snacks, but if you're not always able to get in like a fruit or a vegetable with every snack, that's okay. As long as we can do that with the meals throughout the day, then you should be fine. I do often tell people to look for a short ingredient list on snacks. And usually that's because if you have a shorter ingredient list, there's less of a likelihood that there's more like artificial additives and preservatives and things like that. Now, of course, it depends on like what the specific ingredients are. So you want to take a look, if you're not already, at any packaged foods that you're getting and see if you can find like individual whole foods in that ingredient list, or if it seems like there's like a lot of artificial things or, chemical preservatives and things like that. And then on the nutrition facts label, what we tend to focus on is trying to limit added sugar, salt, and saturated fat. So we're usually trying to limit added sugar if we're trying to control like blood sugar. So for anyone that has pre-diabetes or diabetes, we want to keep salt low if you have high blood pressure. And then saturated fat, we want to keep low to lower cholesterol and also to decrease risk of heart disease. And then the things that we want to get more of in our snacks are fiber to help with digestion and keeping us full during the day, as well as helping to lower cholesterol. Protein also helps to keep us full during the day, and it also helps to keep our muscles strong, of course, and helps with cell turnover for a lot of different cells in the body. And then finally, we want to look for healthy fat. So healthy fat is unsaturated fats, mostly found in like nuts, seeds, avocado, healthy oils, fish like salmon. And healthy fat is cardioprotective. It helps to decrease cholesterol, and it also helps us to absorb fat-soluble vitamins, which are vitamins A, D, E, and K. So those are some of the things we're looking for. And most important with the snacks, we want to plan ahead, just like we've been talking about from the beginning today. Plan ahead. Don't have snacks be last minute, impulsive in the moment, because they're more likely then to just be grabbing a handful of like candy or pretzels or something like that at the office versus something that could be more balanced. Sorry, so I'll come back to that for a second. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And I'm going to actually show you guys some of these snacks that I have available here today. So my first snack that I wanted to show you is non-fat Greek yogurt with almonds. So if you can see, this is the Dannon Oikos 000. You've likely seen this in the grocery store before. So I like this as a flavored yogurt because it actually doesn't have a lot of added sugar. And I know for some people, just eating plain Greek yogurt is just a no-go. And I get it. It is definitely an acquired taste. It isn't something that a lot of people might enjoy having on its own. But this one is flavored, so it does have a good taste to it. And one of the things I recommend that people look for when it comes to Greek yogurt is trying to find one that has more protein than sugar. So the 000 has 15 grams of protein, and it has 7 grams of total carb, 5 grams of sugar. So that's really good. 5 grams of sugar is about the amount of sugar that's in 1 teaspoon of sugar, or like 1 packet of sugar. So that's great. And a lot of nutrition labels nowadays will also tell you how much added sugar is in a product, which is great. I'm usually more concerned about added sugar in a food than just naturally occurring sugar that we get from like dairy products or fruit, because any food that has naturally occurring sugar also has a lot of other healthy nutrients with it, whereas added sugar isn't necessarily adding any extra nutrition, it's just adding extra calories. So the Oikos 000, again, one that I recommend a lot. We get carbohydrates and protein from the Greek yogurt, and then usually I have people pair that with some nuts like almonds. I don't know if you can see the nuts in here. This is 20 almonds. Doesn't look like a lot, does it? So nuts are really easy to overdo it on, even though they're a healthy fat. The serving size is really small. It's only like 1/4 of a cup, which is usually like 20 to 28 nuts, depending on the type of nut. So I usually recommend that people start measuring their nuts if they're not used to doing that, just to see if the amount you're eating really matches up with the serving size. And if you need to get like the 100-calorie packs of nuts, just to make sure that way you're getting what you should be, not going overboard, that can be a really good strategy. So again, carbs and protein, healthy fat. So that's a really good snack combination to start with. And then the second one I want to show you, childhood classic, apples with peanut butter. Could also do banana with peanut butter. And I don't know if you can fully see here, but this is 2 tablespoons of peanut butter, which is 1 serving. I also tell people that 2 tablespoons is about the size of a golf ball. So if you can visualize that, that's a really good way to kind of assess if the amount that you're taking out is actually equal to 1 serving or not. But with something like an apple with peanut butter, we're getting in some fiber from the apple, which is great. We're getting some carbohydrates in, and then some healthy fats from the peanut butter, and a little bit of protein too. So that's another quick option. That one requires a little bit of prep, not a lot. And obviously you don't even have to cut up the apple if you don't want to. I just did that to make it a little bit more visual. All right, so the third one would be taking like a whole grain cracker. And Triscuits are honestly a really good one. I know that might surprise people, but the ingredient list is very short. It is literally just whole grain wheat, canola oil, sea salt. That's perfect, right? Nothing artificial, no preservatives. And the amount of sodium in this is really reasonable. It's 160 milligrams. One thing I tell people if they have high blood pressure and they're trying to find like lower sodium options is trying to find foods that have 300 milligrams or less of sodium per serving. So 160 milligrams is good. So what I would pair this with is some kind of protein source. So I have here a tuna pack. So I know a lot of people don't like fish in the office, but this one can work sometimes because we're not heating it up in the microwave. Now I will be honest, this one is just plain tuna. I would probably not just eat plain tuna with crackers because that wouldn't be as tasty for me. So if I had this, what I would do is I would probably mix it with like half an avocado or even one of those like wholly guacamole packs if people have seen those to add a little bit more flavor. That can be a really good thing to have with you for like a savory snack. And you could also do something like a sliced turkey breast or sliced chicken breast. With products like that, I just recommend that we try to get ones that again have like no preservatives, no nitrates, no nitrites, and try to look for low sodium. So this package of tuna has 210 milligrams of sodium. So again, that's really good. There are some of the flavored ones that are definitely very high sodium. If anyone's seen like the Star-Kissed tuna buffalo style, that one I think has 600 milligrams of sodium per serving. So that's pretty high. So for someone that doesn't have high blood pressure, having that amount of sodium here and there, especially if the rest of your day is balanced, that's fine. But for someone that does have high blood pressure, we really don't want to have foods that are that high in sodium. So start looking at those nutrition facts labels if you're not already. But again, with this snack, we're definitely getting carbs, getting protein. If we did add in something like avocado, we're also getting some healthy fat then too. And then my next one I want to show you is something that's very quick and easy to keep at your desk, which would be a granola bar. So there aren't a ton of healthy granola bars out there, I would say, but there's some good ones. And Kind is one of the best. They have a really good ingredient list, very simple. And they only have, again, 4 grams of sugar added. So again, that's 1 teaspoon, very reasonable if you're craving something sweet during the day. And this is just the original snack size bar for Kind Bar. So this has 15 grams of fat, 3 grams of saturated fat, which is really good. That's pretty low. 140 milligrams of sodium, 16 grams of carb, 6 grams of protein. So 6 grams of protein is not that high. That's why this wouldn't be considered like a protein bar. But it is like a good source of carbohydrates and fat, and it does give you at least a little bit of protein. So we can find Kind bars pretty much anywhere. I've seen these even at like Starbucks and Sheetz and Wawa and things like that. But you can also get them at pretty much any grocery store as well. So these are great to keep in your desk, even in your car sometimes if you're traveling a lot. Just be careful with the chocolate coated ones because if it's hot out, not so good to eat those in your car then. But in this kind of weather, should be fine. And then if you do want a protein bar, you want to get a little extra protein in. I have 2 favorites I want to show you. One's the RX bar. So I'm sure many of you have probably seen these out and about. Again, these are at Starbucks. I know they're often there at the register. So as you can see from the label, they really focus on whole foods only. So the ingredient list for this one, which is the chocolate coconut, is just egg whites, dates, almonds, cashews, chocolate, natural flavors, which admittedly is a little bit of a catch-all. We don't really know what all is in that, but it's meant to be, you know, just minor flavoring, and then sea salt and coconut. So really great, 12 grams of protein. So that's good. That's considered more of a higher protein source. And this one has 23 grams of carbs, 9 grams of fat. So lower fat than the Kind bar, but higher carb. So again, different options depending on what people's goals are. So this is a really good option that mainly uses egg white as the protein. If you did want a plant-based protein option, another good choice are these Aloha bars. I don't know if anyone has seen these before. These are more available, I'd say, at grocery stores than like a Sheetz or like Starbucks, but these are really good options. They have very similar nutrition facts to the RX bar, This one has 14 grams of protein, 26 grams of carbs, 10 grams of fat. Perfect. Very well balanced. These ones are, like I said, completely plant-based. So they use like a brown rice protein and pumpkin seed protein. So if anyone out there is vegetarian or vegan or looking to go more plant-based, this is a really good option. Again, Aloha bars. All right. And then the next one I want to show you here would just be doing like a mixed nut, like these Planters Nutrition. This is a really good option in particular because it has a few different nuts in it. It has cashews, almonds, and macadamia nuts. And then the only other two ingredients are peanut oil and salt. So that's excellent. Very short ingredient list. And this actually only has 50 milligrams of sodium in it, which is awesome. That's very low. And it has, again, mostly healthy fat source, a little bit of protein, pretty low carb overall. For most people, the nuts are going to be good for their fats and their protein, but if they need that carb boost, I would usually recommend pairing it with a fruit. And you could do fresh fruit, or if you want, you could also do a dried fruit. So this is just a dried apricot bag. One of the things I do recommend that people do with dried fruit is look on the nutrition facts label and make sure there isn't any added sugar. There's already going to be plenty of naturally occurring sugar from the fruit, so we don't need any that's added. So I don't know if you're able to see the nutrition facts label too much here, but if you can see where it says sugar, under it, it says added sugar, and you can see that there's 0 here. So hopefully you can see that, but if not, check out what you have at home and start to look for those things. So the nuts and dried fruit or fresh fruit, great option for carbohydrates, protein, and fat. And then next, I want to show you one of my favorites. So this is dried edamame. I don't know if anyone has had this before, but I love this as like a crunchy, healthy snack option. And it's a really good protein source, high fiber, high potassium, which is really great. And it is also just really easy to grab and go and just to keep at your desk. There's no prep required. So this one is a good low fat option. It's, like I said, high fiber, 6 grams of fiber per serving, which is great, and 14 grams of protein. And then this actually has 530 milligrams of potassium and 140 milligrams of sodium, which is really good. That means this is what we would call a potassium positive food because it has more potassium than sodium. And I wanted to mention, just while we're talking about this, that if anyone here has high blood pressure, I'm sure you've probably been told to limit your salt intake. It's also really helpful to increase your potassium intake because sodium and potassium kind of act in opposition in the body. So if you get more potassium in, it helps your body to excrete more sodium. So that helps to lower your blood pressure. So keep that in mind. Lower the sodium, but also increase potassium through foods like edamame and bananas and avocado and things like that. And one of the other ones I wanted to show you that requires just a little bit of prep, makes it kind of fun. I don't know if anyone can tell what this is just looking, but this is a rice cake with hummus and carrots, which is kind of arranged into like a fun sun. So really good activity to do with your children if you're trying to get them to eat more vegetables. But something like that is a really good choice if you wanted to do like a low carb snack. Rice cakes are very low carb. They're what we would call high volume. So they take up a lot of space in your stomach when you eat them, but for very few calories. So that can be really helpful if someone's trying to lose weight, or again, just if you're looking for lower carb to, decrease blood sugar levels, rice cakes can be really good. And then pairing them with like a vegetable like carrots or celery or bell pepper, and then a fat source like hummus or avocado does make for a really good balanced low carb snack. And then I had another one I wanted to share, which I actually didn't have the actual snack food with me for this, but hard-boiled eggs and fruit is another good combo. You do have to watch egg intake if your cholesterol is high, but otherwise, we get some good protein and healthy fats, especially from like grass-fed eggs. Those are not grass-fed eggs, but you know what I mean. When chickens are allowed to go outside and actually get some sunlight and eat some grass as opposed to just eating feed. I'm blanking on the word for that right now. But yeah, the hard-boiled eggs and fruit, really good combo, protein, fat, and carbohydrates. And then the last one I want to show you is more of a high protein option. This is like a healthy jerky, and healthy jerky does exist. So this one is Field Trip brand. You can see the name up here. The other option I recommend sometimes is Epic. So these are really good options if you want to get more protein in. I know protein's a hard nutrient for people to get in sometimes. Now, the sodium's a little higher on these. I mean, it's much lower than other jerky brands, but jerky's hard to get like super low sodium because obviously the sodium is in there to preserve the meat. That's kind of part of the process. But these have 370 milligrams of sodium and 360 respectively. So they're under 400, not under 300, but as far as jerky goes, these are good choices. So if you like jerky or have trouble getting protein in, having these by themselves or adding them to another snack, like adding it with like some fruit to get some carbohydrates, is a really good choice. So those are my top 10 dietitian approved snacks. I hope some of those will be helpful for you. And I think at this time, I just wanted to share my slide one more time, and then we'll see if we have any additional questions left. But I just wanted to mention one more time that, again, I do, in addition to these group presentations, offer individual nutrition counseling. And the individual counseling is really good for individuals that feel like they're having trouble integrating like healthy nutrition practices into their schedule or their routine, or if they have a medical nutrition condition like diabetes, high cholesterol, or hypertension, or high blood pressure, or if there's just like things going on like fatigue or like unexplained weight gain where you don't know where it's coming from and want to investigate that from a nutrition perspective. And if you want to just build a healthier relationship with food, working with a dietitian can be a really good way to do that. So I'll leave this up for now, but if there are any additional questions, I can take those now.
Thanks, Nikki. While we're waiting for some questions, I wanted to ask you, you've done a lot of work with attorneys and kind of customizing meal plans and kind of addressing healthy habits. Can you share what has been the biggest obstacle that you find that attorneys have in this area?
Yeah, I mean, the lack of time really does seem to be the biggest barrier. So like I said, I know for some people, if they're working, 12 or 14-hour days, there is just no way that they're going to be able to go home and cook. I mean, even thinking about trying to get an exercise, like getting in like, steps throughout the day, getting in like a workout at the gym, like it's hard to do it all. And you have to decide what you're going to prioritize. So that's why we really try to get creative with things like doing the meal delivery services or pre-made meals. If someone has like a roommate or a partner at home that's able to do some of the cooking, sometimes that is a good resource to tap into. But I do have some clients where like they literally get mighty meals, for example, like for 14 meals a week. They just know like they're not going to cook, but they want to eat something healthy and not just order food out. So they do that instead, and then maybe just make their breakfast, and then they choose these healthy snack options. And, the idea is that I think we can make healthy eating work for anyone, but not every person is going to literally meal prep every single week. Like that's not, sustainable for some people. So when I work with people, we look at their individual schedules and really talk about what's going to work for them, as opposed to just kind of like, here's the plan I recommend for everyone across the board.
And then I know that you've done some work as far as going into law firms and working with employers and trying to kind of encourage them to support employees in kind of implementing healthy habits. Do you have any suggestions for, employers that, might be on this call, or law firms, people that are kind of, managing partners, as far as things that they could do?
Yeah, great question. Some of the things that I would recommend that can be pretty easy to implement is just thinking about what food options you have at the firm. So like if you are regularly putting out food anyways for events, trying to put out healthier options for employees can be helpful, sometimes including like fruits or vegetables or granola bars or Greek yogurt instead of maybe doing like pastries or pizza or, things like that. Not to say that you shouldn't ever do those
I was
things,
gonna
but
say
just
it's gonna disappoint some people on this.
yeah, no, but making it easier, for them in that way can be helpful. Bringing in a nutrition professional can be really helpful too, to show that you care about your employees' health, and maybe making time where they could meet one-on-one that day at the firm with the dietitian so they don't have to go do it on their own can be helpful. And then, beyond that too, I think just thinking about like what the company culture is, like if you want your employees to be healthy, make sure that, you are making that time and space for them to go to doctor's appointments, go see health professionals, and maybe have opportunities where you're doing, events that focus on bringing speakers in, or having like a yoga day, or not a yoga day, but you know what I mean, a day where you're maybe focused on wellness and there's like a yoga session or massage chairs and things like that. Like doing something like that, even once every few months, can really reinforce that wellness is important, and that we don't expect people to put their wellness on the back burner just to meet their hourly requirements.
Those are all such great suggestions. The timing of this webinar is perfect because, as you know, we're kind of in the tail end of our Lawyer Wellness Challenge. And one of the goals that, we've always had when this challenge was kind of originated is, how do we motivate people to kind of make these changes, not just for 10 days during our challenge, but how do we make this like a lifelong change? Do you have any suggestions as far as healthy habits and how long does it take? What steps to take?
Yeah. Yeah. And, like I said before, I know for a lot of people, it can be easy to want to change a lot of things at once. So, one thing I actually recommend is not doing that and trying to start very small. And if you set very easy to accomplish realistic goals, you're much more likely to actually stick with things long term. And it's good to have the mindset of like, I'm going to make these healthy changes because it'll help me to be healthier in 6 months or a year, or have more that long-term focus. People will definitely sometimes see healthy changes or positive results in a week or a month, but a lot of times things are going to take a lot longer than that to manifest. So we want to have those easy actionable steps. Even if we're doing like 10 minutes of walking a day, that sounds really small, but it's probably doable. So that could be a really good place to start and build that momentum, and then start adding more things. And beyond that, again, sometimes people really just need the accountability. So that's where like working with a professional like myself can be helpful for a lot of people, knowing like they're going to check in with their like nutrition coach every week or every other week, makes it a little bit easier for them to really prioritize it, because it's not just answering to themselves, it's answering to someone else. So if someone's ever struggled with that before, that might be a good sign that reaching out to someone to hold you accountable would be helpful for you.
I think it's so important, Nikki, what you said about just, even small changes in the long term can really have some big impact, and kind of starting where you can. Not everyone can make, changes overnight. So just sort of that consistency. I think those are all such great suggestions. As far as working with professionals, you work with attorneys. Can you kind of give us a little bit of information? I know that we have about just a couple of minutes left, a little bit more about your customized kind of approach.
Yeah, absolutely. So for anyone that I start working with, we always, take like a full hour to meet, and we thoroughly review like their health history, their nutrition habits, exercise habits, their schedule, food preferences, allergies. I mean, we cover it all. And after that first meeting is where, I really put together what the plan should be. And I really try to do it collaboratively with the person I'm working with. Like we talk about like, what do you think you could do for these meals or these snacks? Like, do you think you could cook like during the week, and when? So it's not just prescriptive, like me telling people what to do, it's a team approach. And that way, like the client has more ownership over the plan because they helped come up with it too. So, we just make sure that everything is taking into account that person in terms of their preference and their needs. And then we tweak things, like I said, week to week or bi-weekly or monthly, depending on how often we meet, to make sure they're continuing to see progress.
That is great. Well, Nikki, thank you so much for giving us all of this useful information. And I'd like to thank, oh, I have one last question. How long do you expect someone to prep or cook on a Sunday to make everything for the week?
If they're trying to cook for the whole week, usually what I would have people try to do there is maybe have like a few different things going at once. So maybe we'll put something in the crock pot that takes like 6 or 8 hours, but it's obviously very hands off. So it might only take like 5 or 10 minutes to prep it, and then you just gotta wait. So we might do like one thing that's that, and then we'll maybe do some things that are in the oven, like doing like roasted vegetables or like chicken breasts. And again, that's pretty hands off once things get in the oven. So like in terms of like hands-on prep time, most of my clients are not doing more than like 30 to 60 minutes. It's not a lot of time. It's more time just letting the food cook typically, but the actual hands-on time is not very long. And I really try to do it that way because, I don't want to spend hours in the kitchen either. Like I understand. So we try to make it as, short as possible and just try to get as much done at once. And sometimes we freeze things too. So if you make something like, for example, I have like a Mexican crock pot casserole recipe that I recommend. That freezes really well. So we can sometimes like make something on Sunday that lasts till Wednesday, but then bring out something we froze earlier for the rest of the week. So it doesn't have to be hours in the kitchen on a Sunday. Like honestly, like 30 to 60 minutes of hands-on time is usually what it takes.
So it sounds like what I hear you saying is some of that prep and planning on Saturday kind of cuts out some of the meal actual prep time on Sunday. And then
Yes,
also kind of having lots of things going at the same time, whether it's that's the Instapot or the slow cooker or the
mhm,
oven to sort of save time overall.
exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know like some of my clients don't like to cook, so we try to keep things really quick and easy. For those that like to do it and like actually enjoy it, we can do more like complex recipes. But again, the goal is to really do what works best for each individual person.
Well, I found all of these suggestions to be super helpful. I definitely was writing down a little grocery list myself. So thank you
Perfect.
so much for taking the time. And I'd like to thank everyone who registered for our webinar and for everyone who's participated in the Lawyer Wellness Challenge. Um, Hopefully everyone from hearing all these suggestions can, take that first step to try to implement some healthy habits. So thanks everyone. Thanks again, Nikki.
Yes, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Bye.